Camille Osei was 38 years old the morning she drove 4 hours to surprise her husband on his business trip and walked into a hotel lobby that told her everything his phone calls had not. She looked the part of someone's wife and nothing more. She drove a 9-year-old Civic with a dent above the left rear wheel well that she had been meaning to have pulled out for 2 years. She wore her hair natural and unpenned on weekends, kept her wardrobe practical and her jewelry modest, and had packed her lunch every workday for 6 years without ever thinking of it as a statement. She was the kind of woman people looked past in a room, which had suited her purposes for a long time, though no one in her life had ever thought to ask why. Her husband, Dwayne Osei, was supposed to be in Raleigh for 4 nights, a regional sales conference. He had kissed her cheek on a Wednesday morning, told her he would call when he landed, and driven away in the company car with the ease of a man who had done this many times and felt no friction in it. He had not landed in Raleigh. The hotel Camille walked into was 45 minutes from their house in Atlanta. She had found the reservation in a paper statement she never would have looked at twice, except that it arrived the same week, $35,000 moved out of a savings account she had believed was untouched. What Dwayne Osei had never thought to ask, not in 10 years of marriage, not once, was whose name the account holding 3 times that amount was registered in. What happened next would cost him more than a weekend. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The house on Delray Drive in Atlanta's West End sat behind a front garden Camille had built herself over 3 summers. Starting from a patch of bare Georgia clay and working outward native grasses along the low fence, a row of knockout roses down the center path, a small Japanese maple she had planted in the far left corner the spring after her grandfather died, because he had loved the way those trees held their color deep into autumn, when everything else had already let go. She was a logistics director for a mid-sized supply chain firm. She had held the position for 6 years and had built the regional distribution network from a single contracted warehouse into an operation spanning 4 states. And she had done it through a discipline that her grandfather had described when she was still young enough to be climbing on his furniture. As the only real talent worth developing, the ability to see the full picture before acting on any piece of it. Her grandfather, Chester Boateng, had come to Atlanta from Kumasi, Ghana in 1971 and had spent 30 years running a freight forwarding business out of a converted warehouse in Vine City that eventually handled contracts for 3 of the region's largest manufacturers. He had started with a single delivery van and a rented telephone line, and he had built that into something that employed 22 people and survived 3 recessions and a fire that took the original warehouse in 1989, which he rebuilt in 14 months without missing a single client delivery. He had been a meticulous man in the way only people who have built things from almost nothing could be. Every detail tracked, every relationship documented, every contract read twice before signing and filed where it could be found without a search. He had retired at 72 and died at 78. And in the last good year, before his health declined, he had sat with Camille in his study on a Sunday afternoon and told her that the secret to any operation was never speed. Speed was for people who could afford to make the same mistake twice. For everyone else, there was only one workable substitute. Patience is the engine, he had said. Everything else is just fuel. She had carried that into her work and into her marriage, and into the years she had spent watching Dwayne become someone she recognized less and less, without being able to name precisely when the shift had begun. Only 2 people outside her immediate family knew the full scope of what she had accumulated in the 12 years since she had quietly opened the investment accounts that bore her name alone. Her grandfather had been one of them. The other was Phyllis Ransom Carter, who had structured the accounts and counseled her on how to keep them separate, and who had never asked why Camille wanted them that way. because Phyllis Ransom Carter had practiced family law for long enough to know the answer before the question was finished. They had met at a logistics conference in Charlotte 11 years ago. A year before they married, he was in sales for a manufacturing company, polished in his presentation and warm in the particular way of men who understood that warmth was a professional asset worth developing. He had approached her after her breakout session on regional network optimization, asked a question that proved he had listened to the actual content of what she had said, and then asked if she would be willing to continue the conversation over dinner. She had said yes, which surprised her slightly, because she did not typically make professional adjacent decisions on short notice. He had shown up on time. He had listened more than he talked, which was rare enough in those rooms that she noticed it. He had ordered dessert without asking what she thought about it, which was a small thing but told her something about a man's relationship with his own preferences. And he had walked her to her car and shaken her hand rather than pressing for more, which told her something about his patience. She had not been wrong about what she saw in those early years. She was willing to give him that much. Still, it had been real. It had also been finite in a way neither of them had examined, and the finitude had expressed itself not in a single moment, but in a long, slow erosion of small choices he had made in the space she was too trusting to audit. The first signal had arrived 8 months ago. A shift in the quality of his telephone manner when he left the room to take a call. Not guilty, exactly, practiced. The difference between a man who needed privacy and a man who had developed a habit of privacy, and those were not the same thing. She had noted it without acting on it, the way she noted an anomaly in a distribution report, marked, flagged, waiting for a second data point to confirm the pattern. The second signal was a hotel loyalty card on the counter in his home office, from a property she had never heard him mention, with a membership tier that required significant overnight stays to earn. She left it exactly where she found it. She was not a woman who moved before she had the full picture. The paper statement that arrived on a Thursday in November changed that calculation. She had not opened a paper bank statement in 3 years. They received everything digitally. The envelope came from the bank that held the savings account she and Dwayne had opened jointly in the second year of their marriage. A quiet account, modestly funded, intended as an emergency reserve. She opened the envelope at the kitchen table after work, out of nothing more than habit, and read the balance line twice, because the number there was $35,000 less than the number she remembered. She turned to the transaction history. A single wire transfer. Executed 8 days prior on a Thursday afternoon. Sent to an external account she did not recognize. No memo. No description. Her face remained perfectly calm. She set the statement on the table and looked at it for a long time with the same quality of attention she brought to any logistical problem she needed to fully map before touching. Not reaching for the explanation yet, just holding the fact. Then, she opened the digital portal on her phone, pulled the same account, and found the transaction record with the destination routing information. She wrote both numbers in the small notebook she kept in her work bag. She noted the transfer time, 2:47 p.m., on a Thursday, during a week she now recalled as one in which Dwayne had been unreachable for most of a workday and had explained it at dinner as a series of back-to-back client meetings. She went back further. She was a logistics director. Her entire professional life was built on the discipline of looking at a full system before diagnosing any one part of it. You did not troubleshoot a node. You mapped the network. You found where the flow had been rerouted, and you traced it back to the point of origin, and you did not stop until you had the complete picture. She pulled 18 months of statements from every shared account, the joint checking, the savings account, the shared credit card, and a home equity line they had opened 4 years ago and used only once. She read them in sequence, without rushing, looking for the pattern underneath the individual transactions. It was the same work she did at the office, applied to a different kind of ledger. She did not let herself feel it as anything other than analysis. That would come later. What she found, over 3 hours and a pot of coffee that went cold beside her, was this: a second withdrawal from the savings account, 14 months before the current one, for $12,000, sent to a separate external account. 19 charges on the shared credit card at restaurants she had never heard him mention, all of them on Thursday or Friday evenings over the past 20 months. And the hotel loyalty card membership number, which she had quietly recorded the week she found the card on his desk and now entered into the bank's transaction search field. 2 direct charges appeared against that membership number, April, August, both at the same property in the northern suburbs, both on Thursday evenings. She searched the property. The hotel was 43 minutes from their front door. She did not move for a full minute. Then she picked up her notebook and added 2 lines to the page. She was not a woman who let the weight of a discovery collapse her professional discipline. She had walked into her office on the morning after her grandfather died and run a full operations review because the work needed running. She applied the same steadiness now to herself, which was harder, and she managed it. She was not done yet. She needed the full picture before she touched a single part of it. She did not confront him. She did not ask about the statement. She made dinner that evening and set his plate on the table, and listened to him describe a difficult client meeting with the patience of a woman who knew exactly how to wait. She asked one follow-up question. He talked for 12 more minutes. He did not ask about her day. She was watching him the way she watched a distribution network she suspected had a leak. From the outside, without tipping her hand, building the map before she touched a single node. She opened a new folder on her work device. She named it simply October. The following Saturday, she drove to Decatur to see her attorney. Phyllis Ransom Carter had been in family law for 24 years and had the particular composure of a woman who had walked too many people through the worst days of their lives to be shaken by any configuration of facts. Her office was in a clean brick building on Commerce Drive, with a waiting room that smelled of cedar and a desk that held nothing extraneous. She read Camille's documentation, the withdrawal records, the transaction history, the hotel charge codes and dates, with a thoroughness that took 15 minutes and complete silence. When she finished, she looked up. The wire transfers. You have the destination account numbers? Both of them. I ran a basic property search on one. The account is held at a bank in Buckhead. I don't yet have a name. Phyllis made a note. I can get the name through discovery if we file, but before we do that, I want a forensic accountant on the full marital financial picture. 18 months is what you can see. I want to know what the full window looks like. She paused. And you said he told you he was going to Raleigh this week? He left Wednesday morning. The conference he named is a real conference. I checked. Phyllis looked at her steadily. And you've confirmed he's not there. I haven't confirmed anything yet, Camille said. I wanted to speak with you first. The corner of Phyllis's mouth moved. That, she said, is exactly the right order of operations. Preparation is the work. She called her Uncle Bernard on a Sunday evening, not to ask for advice. She had the advice she needed, but because he was the person she trusted to help her think in straight lines when the lines wanted to bend. He was 64, recently retired from 30 years as a general contractor in the northern suburbs, and he lived 20 minutes from her in a house he had designed and built himself on a double lot he had purchased at 38. When people told him the neighborhood was too far from anything to be worth the price. The neighborhood was now one of the more desirable ones in the county. He had known this would happen. He had studied the transit projections and the school district maps and the infrastructure investment patterns, and he had bought the land and built the house and waited, which was what he always did, and which was something he and Chester Boateng had in common in a way that had always pleased Camille to recognize. He had known her since she was 4 days old. He had watched her grow into a woman who ran freight operations the way he ran job sites. Total situational awareness, nothing wasted, the longest possible fuse. He listened to all of it on the phone without interrupting, which was in fact unusual for him. When she finished, he was quiet for a full 10 seconds. "Your grandfather used to say that a man who lies about where he is has already told you what he is," Bernard said. "The location is never really the point. The lie is the point." "I know," Camille said. "You going to go see for yourself?" She considered that. "I think I already know what I'll find," she said, "but I think I need to see it anyway, for my own clarity." "Then go see it," he said, "and take your phone. And drive careful." She took her phone. She left Atlanta at 6:15 on a Wednesday morning, a full week after the statement arrived, because she had spent that week doing what she always did before making a significant operational decision. She had gathered the remaining information she needed to be certain. Phyllis's forensic accountant, a precise woman named Miss Gloria Trent, who had 22 years of experience in marital asset tracing, had already completed a preliminary pass. The findings extended the documented withdrawal pattern back 31 months. Total undisclosed transfers and expenditures from shared accounts, $61,000. The destination account, confirmed through Phyllis's pre-filing inquiry, was registered in the name of a woman named Audra Villiers, 29 years old, a marketing account manager in Buckhead, with a lease on a condominium in Brookhaven that she had signed 11 months ago. Dwayne had been listed on the emergency contact form for that lease. Camille had printed the document. It was in the folder on the passenger seat. The hotel was a mid-tier property off a commercial corridor she had driven past 100 times without stopping. She parked and walked in through the lobby with her bag on her shoulder and her face carrying the expression she brought to every site visit: attentive, neutral, unhurried. She had the hotel name from the loyalty card, the date range from the bank statements, and a question she needed answered not for evidence but for her own quiet clarity. She walked to the front desk and asked for the room of Dwayne Osei, using the company account name he would have used to book. The clerk looked at his screen and then looked at her and asked if she was expected. She said she was his wife and that she was here to surprise him. The clerk called up to the room. She stood at the desk with her bag on her shoulder and her hands at her sides, and she did not look at her phone, and she did not shift her weight from foot to foot. She waited the way her grandfather had waited for contract confirmation from clients who took longer than they should, with the composed patience of a person who already had the information they needed and was simply allowing the situation to arrive at the truth on its own schedule. A few moments passed. Then the elevator across the lobby opened, and Dwayne stepped out. He was not in conference clothes. He wore a casual shirt and relaxed pants, the clothes of a man who had no professional obligation on this day, in this building, at this hour. He walked across the lobby without seeing her at first, and then he did see her, and what moved across his face in that single unguarded moment was not shock and not panic. It was recognition, the specific, quiet recognition of a man who had understood somewhere below the level of his own acknowledgement that this morning was always going to come. He had simply been betting on more time. He stopped 6 feet from her. He said her name. His voice was even. She looked at him without anger and without performance. She had worked too long in operations to waste energy on emotion that didn't serve the outcome. What she felt, standing in that lobby, was something closer to the stillness that came at the end of a long project. Not satisfaction, not grief, but the particular clarity of a completed reckoning. She reached into her bag and produced the folder Phyllis had assembled. 23 pages of financial documentation. The Brookhaven lease with his name on the emergency contact line. 2 receipts from the hotel's restaurant, charged to his loyalty account on evenings she now recalled as evenings he had been unreachable. And at the front of the stack, on cream-colored stationery, Phyllis's formal filing notice, submitted to the Fulton County Court that morning. She set the folder on the desk between them. "I have everything I need," she said. "Phyllis Ransom Carter is your point of contact from here." He looked at the folder and then at her. He said that they needed to talk about this. He said it could be explained. He said he had meant to. She shook her head once. Not in anger. Just in clarity. 10 years, Dwayne. 10 years to understand who you were married to. She picked up her bag and settled the strap on her shoulder. You chose not to look. That choice is yours to carry now. She turned and walked to the front door and pushed through it into the Wednesday morning, which was bright and cool and smelled of pine from the landscaping along the entrance walk, and the lobby behind her was silent. And she did not look back, and she drove the 4 hours home the way her grandfather had driven every road he considered worth taking, with both hands on the wheel and her attention entirely on what was ahead of her. 15 months later, the Japanese maple in the front corner of the garden on Delray Drive had grown another 1.5 feet, which Camille had not expected and which pleased her with the particular satisfaction she took in things that exceeded their projected pace. She had not moved from the house. She had offered Dwayne a fair buyout of his equity share during the settlement proceedings, calculated at current market value by an independent appraiser she had retained before the filing. He had accepted the offer without counter, because by that point he had already learned what Phyllis Ransom Carter's office was capable of assembling and what the full 31-month forensic record contained, and his own attorney had apparently advised him that the most intelligent available move was a clean exit. The settlement was documented and closed in 4 months. The $61,000 in undisclosed transfers was returned as part of the equitable distribution ruling, with interest calculated from the date of each transfer. His attorney had requested a 60-day mediation extension. Phyllis had declined and provided a counteroffer of 10 days. They had settled in 8. The logistics firm had promoted Camille to vice president of operations in the spring, which brought with it an expanded team, a national scope, and a budget that required the kind of long-horizon thinking she had always been best at. She had started a mentorship program for young women entering supply chain management. Informal at first. 3 women meeting over lunch on the first Friday of each month to talk about the work and what it demanded and what it gave back in proportion to what you were willing to put into it. Her Uncle Bernard had come to dinner in October and stayed long enough to walk the garden with her and note, quietly and approvingly, that she had gotten the soil composition right on the maple bed, which was harder than it looked with clay subsoil. She had a man named Idris in her life, a quiet architect who had come to her through a work connection, and who had, the first evening they had dinner, asked her to describe the most complicated operational problem she had solved in the past year. She had told him. He had asked 3 follow-up questions and not looked at his phone once. She had driven home afterward, thinking about what it meant to be genuinely asked about your work by someone who wanted to understand it, and decided it meant a great deal. The news about Dwayne arrived through Bernard, who had heard it through a contractor they both knew. Audra Villiers had ended things 6 months after the filing. The Brookhaven condominium lease was not renewed. Dwayne had left his sales position, voluntarily or otherwise, and was working independently in a reduced capacity. A colleague who had known them both had quietly stopped returning his calls. Camille heard it. She noted it. She moved on. On a Saturday morning in December, she stood in the front garden with her coffee and looked at the maple, which had gone the deep wine red her grandfather had loved in those trees. And she stood there for a long time, without needing to do anything other than be in the presence of something she had planted, and tended, and given time to grow. The morning was cold and still, and the light was the particular quality of winter light that stripped everything back to what was actually there. She had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.